Hi best friends. So this is the same night as part 1, but I'm going to go ahead and do part 2. I'm just not going to make you sit through the whole thing all at one time, so we'll be posting it at different times. So we left off with Aidan having open heart surgery when he was just under 5 months old. Everything was fine for a long time. I do remember when Aidan was about 3, he was in daycare. We had him at at-home daycare. The lady had 2 kids of her own. Her mom worked for the Department of Children's Services. So she would get tested all the time. The state would come and test her. She'd have to feed the kids like from all of the nutritional food groups. She'd give us a menu, and there'd be some days where the kids would have like sirloin steak, mashed potatoes, carrots, and a roll, and all this stuff. And I'm like, dang, these kids are eating better than we do. But I do remember at one time during that I was starting to feel a little bit concerned about Aidan. I had noticed that he wasn't really making much eye contact. He was also like not talking as much. Like he spoke really well at first, and then he kind of like backpedaled a little bit. I thought it was possibly because I was kind of overbearing helicopter mom after everything we went through with his heart defect. So anytime that he showed any kind of displeasure, I'm like, do you want something to drink? Do you want something to eat? Like, I was on top of it. So he's like, why talk if mama already gets me everything I need? Give me 1 second. All right, my hand's starting to stick, so I'm using some of my Bev B release papers, which I hope she brings back someday. But I know she didn't enjoy it, so if it doesn't make you happy, Bev, then don't do it. Anyway, so I remember asking her, like, if she thought maybe possibly Aidan might have autism, and she's like, no, I don't see that at all. So I kind of let it drop out of my mind. In Florida at the time, the way they did pre-K was like a half-day thing, so he could have been in pre-K while we were still living in Florida, but it was only half-day, and Matt and I was working. Matt was in school for aviation to do what he's doing now, and that was out in Clearwater, which was like 45 minutes away, so neither one of us would have been able to pick him up after 4 hours. So we just kept him at the daycare. Then Matt got this job out in Georgia. We moved out here, and it was March, April. I called the local school, and Aidan would have qualified for preschool, but I guess it was a lottery. I don't remember if they had spots open, but I'm like, at this point, it would only be a month. Because they get out at the end of May. So I'm like, he'd only be in there for a month. It's not really worth it. We'll just wait until kindergarten next year. So I stayed home with Aidan. Once he started kindergarten, problems started almost immediately. The first few days, they didn't tell me anything. But then one day, his teacher spoke to me and said that when Aidan would get off the bus, that he would just kind of wander off and he wouldn't go to the class he was supposed to go to, and they'd find him in the cafeteria or in a completely different hallway. So she said that I would need to start bringing him in and walking him to class. So I did that. I think it was like 2 weeks in, they called me and said that Aidan tried to choke one of his classmates. When I asked Aidan about it, it turns out that this classmate had a Darth Vader lunchbox, and Aidan wasn't trying to choke him. He was just trying to do the whole, I'm not a Star Wars fan, so I don't remember what it's called, but how they use like the Force to choke. So he was just like doing that because it's Darth Vader. That's what he does. But they had called me and said that he was trying to choke this kid. Aidan was having a lot of trouble staying in his seat. And to be honest, this teacher was an older lady, and I really got the feeling that she just didn't want to deal with it. She even told me at one point that her husband had told her she should have retired and that she should have listened to him. And it took everything in me to not say, yeah, maybe you should have. But you could tell, like, she was done. She had no more patience. I was doing everything I could to try to get Aidan out of her class. And they were like, no, you know, it's a great classroom to be in. She might be a little bit strict, but, you know, the good thing is when they finish kindergarten and they go into first grade, like, they're prepared for that kind of structure because she's enforcing it already. The problem with that is she was mean. And I know my kid's not going to love every teacher, but I feel like in kindergarten, it was his first year of school. Like, you're setting him up for his entire academic career. So if you make it miserable for him from the very get-go, then you're just setting him up to fail later on. And talking about it now I can kind of understand some of the issues that we're currently having. And it might play into that whole experience. So when that whole thing with the choking, even though Aidan said, you know, I was just doing the Darth Vader force thing, we had already called a psychiatrist for him to be seen. And then they set an appointment for 2 weeks out. In those 2 weeks, teacher contacted me again and said, well, we're having issues. Aidan almost like tackled a kid again today, and we're going to have parents upset because your kid keeps attacking them. I asked what happened, and surprisingly, she completely admitted what happened. So Aidan has fine motor skills problems. He's not the best at writing and coloring. They were supposed to be coloring, and Aidan was doing the best that he could, which is not the same as neurotypical, in quotations, neurotypical kids who color at that age. So she was walking by, she saw Aidan's sheet, and she's like, Aidan, you're supposed to color, not scribble. And he said, I am coloring. To him, he was coloring. That was the best he could do. So she picks up his paper and shows the entire class and asks the class, is this coloring or is this scribbling? And the class all says, it's scribbling. So now you've just embarrassed him in front of everybody. And then she puts the sheet back down, tells the little boy sitting next to Aidan to take Aidan's sheet up to her desk and get Aidan a new sheet so that he could do it right. So now you have someone taking his belongings after you just embarrassed him in front of everybody, and you know that there was an issue with possible violence with him before. You've just involved another child that didn't need to be involved. So Aidan got up to go after him to get the paper back, and she came to me saying that Aidan was trying to tackle and attack this kid. At this point, I was so over her, and I told her, and I'm like, that's fine. You know, if you have parents coming to you upset, I'll make sure to let them know that this situation was on you because you knew that there was problems. You knew that we're trying to address them. We're trying to see a psychiatrist and find out what's going on. But you decided to take it upon yourself to embarrass him in front of everybody and then involve their child in the situation and give him a target. It was miserable. Eventually, over time that year, we were able to switch him out into another classroom with another teacher who worked with special needs kids. It was like an integration classroom, and it was great with her. The next year, well, at the end of kindergarten, they asked us, they said, you know, this is entirely up to you, but we can either keep him back if that would make you happier, or, you know, he's fine to advance into first grade. We made a decision to keep him back. And the reason we decided on that is because it had been such a struggle. It was still a struggle to the very end of the year. Kindergarten was supposed to be all day, and frequently, like 90% of the time, they would call me because it was supposed to be all day, but legally they only have to be at school half a day. So they would call me if he was misbehaving in the morning so that I could pick him up at the half day time so that his attendance still counted, but they didn't have to deal with him all day. So when they gave us the option, I said that we decided that we would rather keep him back, and that would buy him a little bit more time to adjust to the structure, because we didn't think he was ready to go into an even more structured environment. So, like, let's give him a little bit more time, see if he matures, see if he adjusts to what things are like in kindergarten before we push him into something even more difficult. So that year he stayed in kindergarten. By then, the teacher that we did not care for had retired, but her best friend apparently was a kindergarten teacher, and she was Aidan's teacher. She was a lot nicer, but they were having issues with Aidan again. The one that we really liked, that he had switched into her classroom partway through the year, had moved away. So this other teacher that he got, that was the first teacher's best friend, she became the integration classroom. So there was her, an assistant teacher, and then a special ed teacher all in the classroom. That year, we went through a period where Aidan would take off. And, like, here's the layout of the school, right? There's a main hallway, like down here. Here's the offices. There's the office, the nurse's office, the attendant's office. There's hallway that goes all the way down, but partway through is like a T. Library's here, and then at the end there's a hallway. And Aidan's classroom was way back at the back corner, and the door to get outside is here past the office. One time he ran out of the classroom, ran down the hall, ran down the main hall, ran down past the office door and out the front door, and was in the parking lot. This school was on the same street. We live close to Savannah. The town that we were living in at the time is called Port Wentworth, and it's called that because there is a port. Barges come and bring containers, and 18-wheelers are driving on that road because the port is on the same road as the school. So 18-wheelers are driving up and down that road all day, picking up containers to take wherever they needed to go. Aidan's school was just after a curve. So my biggest fear was if he got out into that street, because it's not gated. So if he got through the parking lot and out the gate and he got out into the street, if a truck came around the corner, by the time that he saw a kid standing in the middle of the street after coming around that curve, he would not have enough time to brake before hitting him. So when that happened, I told them, you know, I was like, I don't know if you have rules where you're not supposed to, like, physically touch the children or pick them up or anything. But I give you full permission. He was 30 pounds at the time. He was 6 and 30 pounds. He was a tiny little thing. It wouldn't have taken much effort to pick him up or even grab him by the hand and drag him. Like, do something. But I'm like, if he gets out of the classroom, I give you full permission to do what you need to do to get him back and not let him get outside. Not too long afterwards, I was at work one day, and one of my friends, her daughters went to the same school. Actually, one of them was in the same grade. We met on a field trip the kids took. She had an appointment that day, and she finished her appointment pretty early, but she didn't want to go home just to turn around and come back and get the girls. So she just sat in the parking lot at the school and was talking to another friend on the phone while she was waiting for the line to start for the kids to go home. It was like an hour, maybe a little bit more before the end of the school day. So she's sitting in her car in the parking lot talking on the phone, and she sees Aidan run out the front door. And when she sees him, she gets out of her car. And Aidan was afraid of her. She's Italian and no nonsense and yells. So she got out of her car as soon as she saw him. She's like, I need to let you go. Hung up the phone, and she got out of the car. And he just stopped dead in his tracks when he saw her and just looked at her. Her name was Nicole. She called me and was like, hey, you need to come to the school. Aidan got outside again. And she told me that she waited with him outside. Like, she came over and stood with him and took him by the hand, and she said she waited with him outside, and she's like, Stephanie, it was maybe a good 5 minutes before anybody came out to get him. And I was pissed. I ended up pulling him out of school and homeschooling him because I refuse to have my child be killed because they can't watch him at school. I do not understand how there were 3 adults in the classroom and not one of them could have left the classroom to prevent him from getting outside. Not even that. Even if they couldn't, they had phones to the front office. So they could have easily had called the front office and was like, hey, Aidan's on the move. He's coming your way. Make sure he doesn't get outside. Nothing. They did not care at all. So I pulled him out of school, homeschooled him for a little over a year. It started out pretty okay. It ended miserably. He was having like hours-long meltdowns. I was just completely broken. So eventually we made the decision to have him go back to school. By that time, he was in 2nd grade. He kept up. His 2nd grade teacher was great. He did wonderful with her. And I'm telling you all of these things. At some point with all of this, trying to figure out what was going on with him, when we did see the psychiatrist they scheduled us to see was actually about to move and wasn't going to be part of the practice anymore. So I'm not sure why they even booked a new patient with her, but she took one look at him and was like, oh, it's ADHD. Like, did no evaluations. She just saw that he was all over the place and ADHD, here's some meds. He messed with meds for a long time. There was one medication in particular that they tried that he would have a 2 or 3 hour long meltdown every single afternoon after school. And at the end of them, he would either cry and say, I'm so bad. I don't know why I'm such a bad boy. Or he just would not recall at all. But it was 3 hours of just trying to hold him and him fighting and trying to hit himself. He was seeing a play therapist, and the play therapist was actually the first person to say, like, I think he might have Asperger's syndrome, which is technically not a thing anymore, but it falls under the umbrella of autism spectrum disorder. But she thought he might have that. It was a rough time. It took a couple years to find a developmental pediatrician that would actually do the evaluations. They did the evaluations and they did diagnose him as having autism. Excuse me. And they had said if it still existed in the diagnosis books, it would have been Asperger's syndrome, but it's just autism spectrum disorder now. We tried to get him into ABA then, but our insurance didn't cover it. Even though we had really great insurance, for some reason that particular treatment they wouldn't cover. It was so hard to try to figure that stuff out. But yeah, he was diagnosed with autism. Later on, he was diagnosed with ADHD as well. He's been diagnosed with anxiety. So yeah, 2nd grade. He went for the end of the year. He did really great with that teacher. And then we moved. We moved into a different county. The county that we live in now is supposed to be one of the best counties in the state. And we moved for school, and we moved specifically here for that reason, because we were in Chatham, Savannah County before, and we were getting no support, no help at all. Actually, one of the special ed teachers seemed to not know anything about autism at all. And they chalked Aidan up to just looking for attention, and he's just a bad kid, and that's it. That's all they saw him as. And it was impossible to get them to listen. They'd ask me for suggestions at the IEP meetings. I would give them suggestions because I was reading and taking notes. I still have about 1,300 pages of handwritten notes somewhere around here that I've written about Asperger's and autism spectrum disorder, trying to learn everything I could, and different techniques that could be used, that have been used before and have been successful. So they'd ask me for advice, and I'd give them suggestions that I had read that might possibly help, and they completely disregarded them. They didn't even try them. So we were fed up with that county. So we moved into Effingham County, and Aidan attended a new school, and he had a wonderful teacher named Miss Kessler in 2nd grade. Now, when he went back to the other school after I homeschool, he went for the end of 1st grade. So when he moved schools, he entered at 2nd grade. He had Miss Kessler. Miss Kessler, I swear, is an angel. She was so amazing with him. She always made him her special helper because he loves that. He loves feeling like he's helping. So she'd always have him like the special assistant. Even after he left her classroom, sometimes they'd have him go down to visit her, and he would help the younger kids with the schoolwork, and he just thought that was amazing. But she had a son that was a little bit older than Aidan, but sometimes like he wouldn't be that hungry, so she'd get him like a Happy Meal, and she'd keep the toy from the Happy Meal for Aidan, and she'd like sneak it to Aidan in class. We have a whole bunch of cups and stuff for McDonald's, holographic ones that were her son's that she kept to give to Aidan. Even at the end of the school year, she gave Aidan her phone number so that he could FaceTime with her over the summer so they could stay in touch. She did so great with that class of kids that they had her move up into 3rd grade with those kids. And Aidan, again, had a great year. No behavior issues. Grades were on point. He was doing wonderful. And then 4th grade came. Now, in 4th grade, unfortunately, she did not move up. Not only that, but 2nd and 3rd grade were both in the same hallway. 4th grade was in a completely different hallway. The principal of the school changed. The assistant principal of the school changed. There was so much change, and Aidan struggled both 4th and 5th grade. I was getting phone calls a lot to go pick him up. So it was really rough. And he would shut down and not want to talk to anybody. There were times that he would just like hiss and growl like he was an animal because he just wanted to be left alone. I'd have to get him, and I'd have to like try to pick him up and actually physically carry him to the car. There has been a couple of times where a teacher or principal or some admin would have to ride. One would ride in their car behind us, and one would ride in my car with me and Aidan to keep Aidan in his seatbelt so that we could go home. So we were getting calls pretty frequently. And one day, Aidan was 10. I got a phone call and they're like, you know, he's at the office right now. He will not talk. He's just growling and hissing. He won't let anybody come near him. He won't talk to anybody. We really need you to come pick him up. So I go pick him up. I get there and get in the office that he's in. And they're like, so here's what happened. And I don't remember what the situation was that set off this whole thing. But he got really upset and he said he wanted to kill himself at school. So that was, I mean, they would have called me anyway, but that kind of was a blow because it was so unexpected. I had never heard him say anything like that before. And they didn't warn me of that on the phone before we went to go get him. So I'm just expecting like, oh, this is typical. He's acting up. He's going to be around when he gets home. We have to do this whole exhausting thing again. But no, he had said he wanted to kill himself. When those types of comments are made at school, the policy, like state protocol, is they have to fill out a form with the child. And they said it's more geared towards like high school, older kids, but it still has to be filled out by any child in the school system that makes these comments. But it was like, you know, when I'm feeling upset, this is who I can talk to. These are things that make me relax and feel better. Aidan wanted nothing to do with filling out that form. So they advised the parents. And then at the time, it wasn't like that. But now they've added this extra step that when this happens, not only do you have to go and pick them up and fill out the form, but the parent has to have a re-entry meeting. So if they send them home the next day, the parent has to come in for a re-entry meeting with the guidance counselor and also fill out paperwork before he's allowed to go back to classes. So the first time he said he wanted to kill himself, I was freaked. And he had that play therapist. And anytime there was really bad behavior, like I'd reach out to her so we'd know so she could give me advice on what to do. So I tried calling her and she didn't answer. And then I texted her and let her know what was going on. And she called me back when we had gotten home. And she said, what you need to do is call Coastal Harbor and ask them if they have a bed for a 10-year-old boy. And I didn't know what Coastal Harbor was, but when she asked if they had a bed for a 10-year-old boy, I figured it out real quick. She wanted him to go into a mental health facility. I didn't know what to do with Aidan, so I called them and they're like, well, you're going to have to bring him in for an evaluation first. You know, just come on down. We'll ask him some questions, ask you some questions, and then they'll decide whether or not he needs to be admitted. So I called Matt, and at the time, Matt really didn't have much time off left from work. I remember he was like struggling with having to leave early because he just didn't have the time, or he had been out a lot at around that time. I don't know what the problem was, but I knew when I called him that he was going to say, like, I can't leave work because he thought he was going to get in trouble. But I called him and I said, you need to come home. And he had already known that Aidan made the comment, because I had texted him and I'm like, you need to come home. And he started to say, like, babe, I can't leave work. And I cut him off and I said, they want him admitted into a mental health facility. So he's like, all right, I'm leaving right now. He works about half an hour away from our house. And at that point, I was so exhausted. with parenting Aidan and apparently not getting it right and not knowing what to do for him, and trying so hard, like, to ask him, like, what do we need to do? How can we help you? We want to help you. And he just wouldn't let us in. So I was like, Aidan, come here. And he came over, and I remember the look on his face, like, it looked like he was going to cry, but at the same time, he looked angry and, like, dead in the face. But his face was swollen, like he was crying or was going to cry. And I asked him, like, what can I do? How can I help you? Like, you have to tell me, what can I do to help you? And here we go. Okay, this is the really hard part. He just gave me that angry, dead look and said, kill me. And I was like, never. And he said, kill me now. And then the tears started falling from his cheeks, but he still looked angry and dead in the eyes. And I was like, Aidan, get over here right now. So he came over next to me, and I scooped him up like a baby. He was 10, but he was my baby. And I just lost it. And Matt walked in the door to me cradling Aidan like a baby, rocking back and forth, saying, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do, over and over again. So that was the first time Aidan said something about wanting to kill himself. It's been pretty frequent since then. We have sometimes, like, a good couple months where he doesn't say it, and then he'll say it again. And it's been living on bated breath, waiting for this to happen again. And it makes me so angry because I already know what it felt like to almost lose him. Please don't take my sunshine away. So it makes me angry, and this is part of why I'm not a very religious person. Why make me go through that? Why make us go through that? Almost losing him, and now he wants to go away. Like, I can't. So anyway, we took him in to be evaluated, and they did not admit him at that time. Thankfully, he had a psychiatrist appointment the next day. Not only that, but they said that they felt like at his age it would be more traumatic to have him admitted. So since he was following up with his doctor already, they decided not to admit him. But like I said, it's been a thing the last few years. He's now in middle school. He's been struggling really hard in middle school. I attempted to work for a while. I worked in a retail pharmacy for over 2 years. And things went well for most of the time. But then this past summer, we went on a real bad downward spiral. And again, it was every day phone calls from school, and it was either behaviors. He had hit somebody with a backpack. He wouldn't come out from under the desk. He picked up a broom and was like trying to hit people. So it was either stuff like that, or he had said he wanted to kill himself, and I had to pick him up for school, and then I'd have to come back the next day for a re-entry meeting, and it became unmanageable. I was so anxious because I was just, every day driving into work, I would wait and half expect, I'm sorry if I bumped you, I would half expect the school to call me while I was driving to work to go pick him up. And it's just me and Matt out here. We have no family. We don't really have any close friends. So I can't, when they say like you have to come pick him up, I can't just be like, no, I'm not going to pick him up. I can't do that. I can't say, hey mom, can you go get him? It's just us. And even though I hated it that I was always on my shoulders, that I'd have to be the one to leave to go get Aidan, like, I understand it. And it's something that needs to be done for our family because, one, Matt is being trained for a promotion at work. So he can't be just dropping everything and leaving every day to go get our son at school, because that promotion will go out the window. But also Matt makes at least 3 times more than I do an hour. So my loss of income is meager compared to his loss of income. But yeah, this past year it got bad. My anxiety was through the roof. I was having migraines all the time because I was so stressed out. In August, school starts in August, the beginning of August here. In August of this past year, at the end of the month, Aidan had said that he wanted to kill himself. And we were concerned enough to bring him back to Coastal Harbor to have him evaluated. And I hate to admit it, and I don't know if it's going to make me sound bad or not, but we took him down there, and I honestly I mostly expected them not to keep him. I was at a point where I didn't know if Aidan was just using it and saying it to get out of being at school. So I'm like, you know, we're going to take him and maybe that'll scare him that he might have to stay there. Well, they talked to us, and then they talked to Aidan privately. And then after talking to Aidan privately, they told us that they were going to be keeping him. So we had to come home, which was an hour away, to get clothes for him. And it had to be pants that didn't have any waistbands, so that he couldn't hurt himself with the waistbands. This was during the pandemic. So the first time we went, I saw a note on like a sign in the office that said what their visiting hours were, and visiting hours were only like 30 minutes in the afternoon. That's it. And I asked, you know, with him being a minor, is it possible for me to stay here with him? And they said no. And I don't like the thought of that. I don't like him being alone. I don't like, with him being autistic and having communication skill issues, who knows what would be done in that facility that shouldn't be done, that he wouldn't be able to communicate to me. So it freaked me out. Now, because of COVID, there was no visiting hours at all, and all we got was a 10-minute phone call in the evenings. And that's the only contact we had with him for 3 days. And it was really, really hard. They changed his meds while he was there. And after he came out, it was like he was a different kid. I mean, we had issues before, but he was just always so angry over nothing. That was just his natural mode, was just angry. So he was getting even more trouble, even more trouble at school. And that's when they, you know, he was hitting people with backpacks and stuff. So it got to a point where I was worried I was going to lose my job. My boss got upset with me, and I told her I had to leave, and she tried to pretend like she didn't hear me, thinking that I was just going to be like, oh, okay, I don't have to leave. I don't know what her plan was. And then when I came back and I tried to talk to her about, you know, how apologetic I was, and I felt like I was failing as an employee and as a mom, and I was having a hard time juggling everything, and I was just completely overwhelmed. She's like, well, I didn't like how you said that you had to leave. Like, you didn't ask to leave. You said that you had to leave. Yeah, I kind of do. He's my son. I have nobody else that I can rely on. So when his school calls me and says that he hit somebody and he's been suspended, I have to pick him up. In her situation, her parents live with her, so they can watch the kids whenever. I don't have that. And over the past couple months before that, I could feel that one of the coworkers that I thought was a really good friend, who also has a son who's having trouble, he's just getting himself into trouble and ran away from home and all this stuff. But I figured as a mother with a teenage boy that she would be the one to understand, and she was just shit-talking me to everybody else. So I tried continuing to work. The next time I worked after having that conversation with my boss, I got a phone call. It was a Wednesday. I got a phone call in the morning. I didn't answer it. It was from the school. I didn't answer it because I was with a customer. I checked my voicemail afterwards, and they were saying that they were having issues with Aidan, but they were going to try to talk to him and, you know, see what they could do. And they'd keep me informed. So I called back and I told them, like, listen, sometimes you're calling me for, like, because he's under a table. Like, he's not hurting anybody. That time that they called, he was in her office on the floor. And she's like, I can't get him up off the floor. You need to come get him. And I'm like, lady, you call me every single day. I have a job. I am going to lose my job. Like, if you won't get up off the floor, then leave him on the floor. I cannot keep leaving over little things. It's one thing if he says he's going to kill himself and it's protocol, or if he's suspended, but it's different when he's just under a chair and just wants to hang out there. Then just leave him there. I'm at work. You wouldn't be able to just leave work every single day. So, that day, they ended up calling me back and said something else happened. And I'm like, I cannot leave work. Like, I just had a conversation with my boss. I'm on thin ice. If I leave work today, I will get fired. And she's like, okay, but can your husband come get him? So Matt did leave that one day to go get Aidan. And that night I called my mom when I was driving home, and we kind of had a blow up, and I felt like I had nobody I could talk to, and I was overwhelmed. Aidan was so angry that I was honestly afraid of him. I had made the comment a few times, like, I'm going to end up on a true crime story. I'm going to be one of those parents that gets killed by their kid. That's the kind of anger. And Aidan had never been like that. He was always really sweet when he was younger, very empathetic. If you listen to my story yesterday about Sadako and the paper cranes, you heard that we listened to the story and he was sobbing. So he is a very empathetic and sensitive kid. So for me to fear him like that was completely a different thing. And that just blew the anxiety and depression and feeling like I was failing and not knowing what to do. It just blew it out of the water to a different level. So yeah, Aidan still, like, now we go to ABA, as you guys have seen my setup if you follow me on IG. I sit in the car for 4 hours, but it's starting to get too hot, so now I have to sit in McDonald's for 4 hours. And sometimes I don't even want McDonald's, but I have to sit there because that's the only place with air conditioning, and I'm not going to sit there and not buy something. So, Starbucks is closed, indoor seating. So, he's going to ABA. He's been doing really great. He has a regular, like, talk therapist, counselor, and he's actually starting to open up to her and talk to her. He's been back to his loving Aidan self. But, I mean, we had a situation a couple weeks ago where he was supposed to have ABA, but it was state testing at school. And doing the state testing determines whether or not he'd be able to move on to the next grade. So I had told him, like, oh, well, you're not gonna be able to do the testing, because he told me about it the night before, and I'm like, well, you have ABA tomorrow, so and he's like, well, you know, this determines if I get to go to the next grade. And I'm like, I'm sure they have makeup days. But I kind of relented, and I'm like, you're showing more maturity. I'm going to leave the decision up to you. If you'd rather go to ABA, we'll go to ABA. If it would be less stressful for you to go and do this test at school and get it over with, then go to school. Like, it's up to you. I will support whatever decision you make. So he decided to go back to school and do the test. Give me a sec. Well, they got to the math portion, and the first problem in the math portion was like adding fractions or multiplying fractions. And his answer, he got like a whole number and 2/4. So he asked the teacher, like, hey, are we supposed to simplify this? And the teacher said, I can't answer that, which I'm pretty sure is a rule with the state testing, that the teachers are not allowed to give any input at all. So Aidan got upset because he's like, I just need to know if I'm supposed to simplify. It doesn't tell me if I need to simplify. And that, if you know anything about autism, that's an autistic thing. Like, you need clear, concise directions. If there's something that they deem important that's missing, they're not going to know what to do, and it throws them off. So there was that, and then they came across another problem that sounded like it might be geometry, but Aidan said he has not learned geometry yet at school. So keep dropping drills or leaving drills on my tray. Excuse me for a second. So Aidan completely shut down at that point because he had absolutely no idea what to do. And to give you an idea of saying the suicidal things, Aidan will say that he wants to kill himself because of that, because he didn't know how to do a math problem. To him, that means he's a failure, that he's never going to succeed in life. And we don't push that kind of stuff. I mean, I want him to try, I want him to get good grades, but we've never expected perfection. We always tell him nobody is perfect. Like, it's fine. You get a couple of problems wrong, it's fine. As long as you're not failing, you're good. You know, most of the stuff you're not even going to use as an adult. You just need to pass. That's all we really care about. Are we proud of you when you get A's and B's? Yeah, but we don't expect it. We just expect you to try your best. And he seems like he understands that, but then the next time that he struggles with something, he goes to the same place immediately, right away. Another thing is if he has a bad day at school behavior-wise, the next day, because there's that whole fight or flight thing. Aidan's got a third function. So it's fight, flight, and shutdown. And shutdown is the one he tends to use the most. So when he's upset and overwhelmed and people are bothering him or trying to figure out what's going on, he just completely closes off, won't speak. Selective mutism, like he pretends like you don't exist. Sorry, I bumped you again. So when he has one of those days where it's particularly bad and I have to go and pick him up, once he's come out of it, usually the next day, he knows that what he did was wrong. He knows that he overreacted to whatever the situation was. And then in his mind, he thinks, I did something wrong. I'm a bad person. I deserve to die. So it's the tiniest things can set it off. So anyway, that's pretty much the full story of Aidan so far. Those are the things that we've dealt with as a family. It hasn't been easy for him. And to be honest, it's like, why him? Why is it always him? We have a big family and we seem to be the only ones that are constantly having these issues, and it makes me kind of jealous. He suffered enough. Like, when is it going to be enough? And it's always something new. So thankfully right now we're mostly in a good stage. Sometimes the suicidal comments will come up. Sometimes there'll be bad behavior at school where I'm getting emailed from the teacher. But with us, he's not angry because they had changed his meds. That seemed to be what made him angry. We changed it a few times trying to get rid of the anger, and it made no difference. And eventually I got to a point where I was like, I feel like the medications now, we're in a worse position we were in than when we started the medications in the first place. And medications should help, not make things worse. So I called the doctor and I'm like, I want to wean him off everything. Like, we need to take him off everything because it's just getting worse and worse and worse. So when we weaned him off, we had 2 amazing weeks right around Thanksgiving. And then there was kind of a kickback. This was also at the same time that I stopped working. So I think part of it was that change of me always being there. Yeah, so there was that change of me always being around, and he kind of felt like I stopped working just to torture him. Typical teenage stuff at that point. But once he adjusted to me being back home, it's my old Aidan is back. And I've missed him a lot. So I've talked about maybe, you know, the original plan when I took time off was just a leave of absence, but I've told Matt my opinion, and it seems like he might agree with me, that it's just not what's right for Aidan. Aidan seems to need me to be around, and every time that I try to work where things seem like they're going pretty well and I'm like, hey, maybe I could go back to work, it doesn't take long for things to go downhill. So I think after 3 attempts of this, I think I've gotten the hint that he just needs me to be a bigger part of his life right now. And at the end of the day, me working helped with bills a little bit. I mean, it helped with our mortgage. And it was also my play money for diamond paintings. So I've had to try to pull back. I haven't been that successful. I'm probably going to put my family into debt soon. But I'm trying to pull back from buying kits because I know that my income is missed greatly. But at the end of the day, Aidan's mental well-being is always going to come before diamond painting. And I have plenty of kits. So, yeah, that's everything on Aidan. Hopefully we will be doing a Q&A soon. If you're still here and haven't been like, this is not for me, thank you so much for listening and letting me vent and kind of brain spew all over you. That sounds so, besides the brain part, that sounds dirty. I'm sorry. Yeah, I was going to say something and it just dropped out of my mind, but thank you guys so much for being here. Oh, I just thought of it. So for those of you who do know me and know me pretty well, or have seen me in Instagram lives or goofing off on YouTube, now I am in a little bit better place, but a lot of the goofiness and the pervertedness and the silliness is just my way of venting from being so tightly wound and anxious and still on edge all the time, because like I thought things were great for a long time, and then last week we got that phone call about the math test and him wanting to kill himself. So it's always like, when's it coming again? So I kind of try to distract myself by being silly and gross and making people laugh. It's kind of like I'm hurting, but I can make somebody else feel better kind of a thing with me. So there's definitely two sides, and I try to show the happier side, but I also want you guys to know us and our family, and I don't want people to be mean to Aidan on the internet if he seems a little weird or anything, because he is different. I mean, we're all different in our own ways, but his sense of humor is a little weird. But we're both a little weird, and we love that about him. But yeah, I just wanted you guys to get some background in case any references to any of the mental health issues or anything comes up in that Q&A. That way you know us on a deeper level as a family. Also, real quick in here, this is why I am so grateful for those of you who have gone to bat for us. When people complain about not being able to get a pen, we are doing the best we can. If we could turn out more pens for everybody, we totally would. But Matt has a full-time job where he works at least 48 hours a week every week. He works 10-hour days, 4 days a week, and then works overtime 8-hour shift, and then he's turning pens. On top of that, we've got all of these issues with Aidan, which takes a lot out of us mentally. We still have days where he gets upset at home and he tries to run away, and Matt has to wrangle him back into the house, and we have to sit there and just watch him to make sure he doesn't hurt himself or try to leave when we're not paying attention. There was one day where he pulled a knife out of the butcher's block, and I didn't know if he was trying to hurt himself or me, so I was afraid to approach him because I didn't know if he was going to stab me. There was another day where someone on the bus said something mean to him, and he came home with this weird half smile on his face and just sat there staring at the butcher block in the kitchen. And it took me a little while to figure out what he was looking at, but again, we had to monitor him. One of us had to have our eyes on him at all times because we didn't know what he would be doing. So there are things going on at home on top of how busy his work schedule is. He is doing his best to get as many pens and products out to you guys as possible. But sometimes real life happens, and sometimes it's an emergency. So our son's gotta be our #1 priority. So I guess that's all I have for you guys tonight. Again, thank you so much for listening and being supportive and loving friends. Hopefully this is as deep as I'll go on a WIP Chat, but this has been the biggest stressor and part of our lives, and I wanted to share. So thank you guys for hanging out with me. I hope to see you soon. Don't forget to like if you liked this. I don't know how many people would like this, but comment and subscribe, hit the notification bell, because things are chaotic and we only get to post when we get to post, and when we're mentally up for it. So thank you so much. I love you guys so much. You make turning these pens and the reactions when you guys receive them, so worth it, and they bring me so much joy. And some days that's all I have to look forward to. So thank you, thank you, thank you for being amazing people. Have a good night. Bye, guys.